What inspired you to become a coach?
I think I was always aware that I was able to help people quite effectively across multiple contexts, both personal and professional contexts over the years. And that led me into doing a counseling training in my 20s and really understanding of what it meant to build really effective, safe spaces for people to share stuff and talk about their challenges and their problems. And those skills have stayed with me right the way through a career working in all sorts of organizational contexts, in management and leadership roles, and at kind of all sorts of levels in all different places. And coaching for me is really an opportunity to bring all of those skills under one kind of heading and really leverage that to help individuals. I think I really noticed when I was working in organizations that the times that I was finding the experience of supporting other people to create change were when I was helping individuals. I think working with teams is really exciting, working with organizations is really exciting, but often the leverage point is working with a person and getting them to understand how to do transformative things. So I feel inspired by helping individuals and helping people to understand the power of stories and narratives, and the conversations that we have with ourselves are really powerful, aren't they? And for me, helping people to understand why those conversations exist in their minds, what those stories are and where they come from is a really powerful way to help them to create change in their lives. So I think the inspiration bit for me is about being able to help people disrupt those patterns and change the way that they're thinking about stuff, and then watching that unfold and being part of that. And I guess ultimately leaving people with the tools to sustain the changes that they create when we're working together. So that's what's inspirational for me.
I love that. And one of the first things you said was about creating a space for people to break all this stuff down and think through it. As you and I know that even as coaches, even with the tools and frameworks we might have, to do it in your head is really difficult.
Absolutely. It's really, as you say, the power of creating the space framework for it is a lot of the work, isn't it? It's just creating that space where it's okay for people to talk.
And I guess what's fairly rare or unique about your journey was that you had this background in therapy, right? Initially, before transitioning into coaching, which you've talked about before, how that's really powerful and useful in your work because it gives you a whole other skill set to draw on. Whereas many coaches come into coaching having not been part of a talking therapeutic world before. I know we've discussed this, but it'd be great to just hear again. Remind me, what was it that drew you to progress from therapy into coaching?
Well, I think there's a huge amount of power in getting insight into ourselves and examining those unexamined parts, those narratives, those stories, and getting support when things have become really difficult. I think my observation about therapy is that sometimes it can be really powerful and create lots of change with people, but sometimes it doesn't step into a space where it can help people to enact doing things differently. There's something about translating insight into action. And for me, there's less constraints on a coaching relationship. And so coaching enables me to get right alongside people and implement some of those new insights and understandings in a more practical way and be alongside them throughout that. The real change happens when people start doing things differently. So it's that transition from insight into action that's really attractive for me in terms of my coaching, because that's how people sustain positive transformations, I guess.
Love that. Insight into action. And again, that's what draws me to coaching so much is the opportunity to build awareness and then do something really powerful with it to create change straight off the back of that. It's awesome.
And I think people come to coaching with that expectation of action straight away. And I think people often turn up to therapy just expecting to talk. And of course, coaching's about talking and discussing things, but that opportunity to really leave people with something at the end of every session that they can go away and do, where they can start actualizing the things that we've talked about, it creates a different relationship with the work for the person in their own process. It feels more sort of collaborative on a different level, I suppose.
So, what's the biggest lesson you've learned on your personal development journey then, or your journey through taking other people through personal development?
I think there was a lot of revelations for me about really understanding the complexity of people and the world, and that over time we don't really know what's going on. We're just imposing a narrative or a story on it. And so I think that kind of acceptance that we don't really understand what's going on a lot of the time was really powerful for me in my own development journey. I think there was a big shift for me maybe like 15 years ago about understanding the power of really focusing on process rather than just getting very fixated on outcome. That if we really tend to the how of what we're doing rather than just focusing on the what, we can learn lots of new things and experience fulfillment on a different level. If we can really embrace and engage with the methods and the processes and the habits and the practices, that's where the real kind of benefits often come from people, is on learning to embrace the journey in a slightly cliched way of doing something rather than getting to the outcome. There's been some really powerful shifts as well. I think growing up in the 80s, and I think some of the schools that I went to, lots of things have been very focused on deficits for people in their lives. And I think that was true for me, is that pointing out what's wrong, people expect you to get better. And so I think that moving from a very deficit focused view of things, or feeling like that had been part of my experience, to a more strengths based framing has been a really powerful shift. Is that I know personally that I do a lot better when I just focus on the things that I'm good at rather than focusing on another cliche, but wrong things writer in some ways. And just really like sticking with my strength and not getting too caught up in the things that I don't do well, or feeling like I'm negotiating with the world for why I'm not so great at one thing. I've just got a lot more out of life through focusing on strengths rather than taking that deficit based approach. So that's been really powerful. I suppose also there's significant stuff for me around cognitive variance and understanding how my brain works, and getting a late adult sort of diagnosis of ADHD was really powerful and helped me to frame some of the challenges that I'd face. So that was quite a profound shift, and accepting that's going on wasn't easy straight away, but has been really powerful in my own development. And I think there's also something as well about just embracing the idea of experimenting with stuff too, really focusing on making small changes and feedback loops and seeing how things land rather than trying to have big grand solutions to getting everything to work. That's not really how the world works. Everything happens in increments as things gradually evolve and change. So really embracing that mindset and being curious about change. But they've all been really powerful things for me.
Nice. What comes to mind for me is, as you talk about your own journey, I think it's the case probably for all of us as coaches, how the lessons and insights you've had along the way are very interlinked with the work that you've done with other people, and how your own learnings empowers you as a coach and enables you to be more effective as you experience these types of insight change and understanding yourself better. And you talked about getting more understanding the how, not just the what, and the process, not just the outcome. That's very much playing out for you, as I understand it, in your journey, right? And then you achieving your goals and navigating your life, and you're seeing how that's playing out for other people too.
Yes. And it's all about embracing the uncertainty, I think, that if we can let go of how we think things should be, there's a lot more to be enjoyed if we just go with that emergent process, that completion of stuff.
So obviously you do work with lots of different people, a lot of leaders and business owners and everyone in between. But obviously you also have a sort of specialism in supporting people with ADHD or neurodivergence. How does your experience with the diagnosis that you just mentioned, how do you think going through that helps you with, particularly with your clients who have also experienced sort of adult diagnosis of, say, ADHD?
I think just the lived experience of it is powerful. Certainly what I get back from the people that I support, neurodivergent people with ADHD or other types of neurodivergencies, it's that having somebody with therapeutic background and a coaching focus in the organizational work, but has a sense of what their thought processes might be like, or their experience of being in a world that perhaps doesn't understand how their thought processes are manifesting, seems really powerful for the people I support. I think it's having that particular lens for people. And of course, I'm not professing that I know what's going on in everybody's brain at all. We don't at all. But there are some fundamental challenges that neurodivergent people experienced, often around their executive functioning, often in their ability to manage emotional responses, or to actualize the ideas, or to bring their strengths into reality. There are a lot of common patterns that I experience both in myself and in the people that I support, and navigating that with somebody who can really empathize and be compassionate about that at a deep level. A lot of my clients don't feel like they've spent a lot of their time pretending that that's not really going on for them. And so it feels quite liberating to be in a space with somebody where like that can just come down completely and we can really connect around that stuff.
I'm sure. So your experience of having gone through it obviously is reassuring for people, is what you're saying, in the sense that you have an actual lived experience, you have insight into what they might be going through at the same time. What are the challenges that you get really excited about helping people with? I know there's many things, that you do help people with very effectively. But I think sometimes we all have our things that we just almost can't wait to get into, help people solve. What are they for you?
I love working with people and where there are these competing tensions and there doesn't feel like there's any good outcomes. I really like navigating those situations with people because it's often an opportunity to really strip things back, people to reconnect with things like their values and their strengths and their purpose and their needs and their cognitive variance, perhaps. Really identifying what those things are for people can often create this opportunity to recenter and recalibrate and then navigate their way through that complexity. But it's like creating assets that people can use to guide themselves through that complex decision. I'm not here to try and solve the problem on their behalf, but to create a framework in which they can understand the way that they can find their own way through it. And so that work is always really exciting for me because it serves people incredibly well long term. Is the feedback that I get, is that whether they might work through a complex situation with me, but they'll always have the ability to connect back with those things to help themselves recalibrate and recenter themselves. So it becomes almost like a decision-making tool or framework that they're left with as a legacy of the coaching work. And that's of endless interest to me. I find it really exciting.
Massively, which is what we're all about, right? In so many ways. It's not just solving the current problems, but providing a framework to solve future problems independently. Could you give an example of that, maybe?
I guess there's often a point in our development as adults where our brain does a final bit of developing in sort of like 28, can be any time between 26 and 33. And I guess some of this recentering often needs to happen at that point. And the tension that people at that time can experience is that everything feels ostensibly okay. I've got a job, I'm making money, I'm doing the thing that I wanted to do, I've got the relationship and the house that I wanted, I've got all of those things, but something doesn't feel right. And there's an urge to create a change or do something differently, but it doesn't make sense to them because they've got everything that they wanted around them. So that kind of tension within themselves where they can't make sense of it. It's based on how they were feeling 5 years ago or what they wanted when they were a bit younger. So that's the kind of tension that I'm talking about, where something feels inexplicable or doesn't make sense to a person. And I guess that feeling of stuckness that can often, when we've got those tensions, turn up as anxiety or unhelpful thought patterns or loops or destructive behaviors or any sort of self-sabotaging pattern. But when there's this sort of sticky problem that doesn't make sense at the middle of it all, that they're trying to distract or avoid or get away from. So I really like leaning into those kinds of problems with people.
God, I get you now in terms of what you were meaning by that tension. And I think it's an underlying theme in some of the work we do. Sometimes the way it often ends up being articulated when I'm working with people is like, my life looks great on paper, so I don't understand why I feel kind of meh.
Yeah.
Or why I feel so crap about it. I actually really don't feel happy, but I have all the things that I thought I wanted. And it's a very bewildering place for people to be, right? But I guess you're saying how rewarding it is to take people out of that. And great. What would you want to say to someone who is considering exploring coaching for the first time?
Don't underestimate the power of saying what's in your head out loud to somebody where there's no consequences to it, and that person is trained to help you effectively. Taking the thoughts out of your mind and saying them out loud, it's just the most powerful thing because it immediately becomes something that you can act on, becomes less abstract. It's that power of articulation. I think humans have done it evolutionary wise over our entire existence. There's always been somebody that you can go and talk to in the village or whatever, or that kind of thing. It's a very natural thing to do that we should be doing, going and saying our thoughts out loud to people. I don't coach in the absence of having been coached, and I don't talk about therapy in the absence of having received lots of therapy over my life course. I just think it's an incredibly important thing that everybody should go and do, whether or not they're experiencing massive problems, because we really understand things differently when we start gathering different perspectives on it and getting out our story, our narrative about life.
I love that. So just don't underestimate the power of speaking out your thoughts in a space where there's no judgment. Nice. It's a great one. What's your favourite thing about being a coach?
My favourite thing is probably the variation of it. I love human interaction. I love working with lots of different people. And I think that I love being able to adapt my skill set around the person in front of me, and that opportunity that we have to really tailor and personalize the support that I'm giving somebody. And
Mm.
it's that opportunity to really leverage all of those different parts of my professional background in a way that's really helpful for the person that's in front of me, not taking something off the shelf, not reapplying the same over and over again, but wrapping all of what I can do around that individual. So I really enjoy that's endlessly interesting to me, and it keeps me engaged. And I can be prone to get bored by things. Working with people has always been something that really captures my attention. I find it deeply stimulating and rewarding. There's a huge kind of element of watching other people change and seeing those big perspective shifts. It's so amazing when somebody suddenly sees something in a really different way, and that leads them to take actions differently. But I guess on a very selfish level, in terms of the question that you're asking, it's just really interesting and stimulating for me, and I'm really passionate about it. So that's why I do it.
Love that. I guess a part of what you said in there was ultimately how everyone's different, right? Every journey is unique. And so you are always tailoring your approach. You're always drawing on different tools and skills from your library and tailoring them to your client, which I agree with, by the way. It's something I love about what we get to do. Of course, the reward and fulfillment of seeing people change positively is amazing. But the fact that it keeps us engaged, because like you, I can also get bored easily. One of my ways of self-sabotaging is it's restless, right? So I want to move on to something that's new and exciting. But every single person I work with is its own new exciting journey. They're never the same, ever, which is really cool. Do you think AI can right now or could in the future as effectively as you can read, judge, select, and adapt to what the client needs?
Well, I think that AI is already very good at appearing that it can do that, but I don't think that it can do that now, or possibly, I mean, who would say never at this point about AI? I think that there's so much that goes on in communication, in how we engage all our senses when we're talking to people, whether we're in a room, whether we're over Zoom, eye contact, the intonation of voices, the volumes, the expressions, and all of those things. There's so much more data happening in human exchange that AI doesn't have access to. I think the answer is that it probably doesn't get very close to it yet at the moment. That doesn't mean that I don't think it can't be really helpful in a coaching
Yeah.
context for
Yeah.
people. I just think that as it stands at the moment, AI is really good at mirroring the behavior and has a slightly people pleasing tendency to it, where it tells the person what it thinks they want to hear. And that can be really positive and affirming for the user. If they're talking about a challenge or an issue, it can be quite motivational and quite helpful in thinking about it in slightly different ways. What it doesn't do is genuinely disrupt how people are thinking. It just follows, mirrors. It doesn't really disrupt what's going on for a person. So I know as a coach, my job is to try and help people shift perspective or change direction around how they're thinking about something. And AI is just really good at following them along at the moment.
Interesting that you say that for a lot of reasons, because I use AI tools for myself and it's quite often for decision making and stuff within business and to kind of evaluate pros and cons and things like that. I find it brilliant. Well, I am frequently saying, are you just trying to please me? Don't tell me what I want to hear, challenge me. And that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because we know as coaches, one of the really important things we do probably is knowing when to challenge someone and knowing actually when just to support them. Finding that balance, reading the person, and that might shift throughout their coaching journey. It might even shift within a coaching session, right? There are times it's appropriate for us to challenge someone, to get them to dig deeper. And there's times for us not to do that, just to sort of be more gentle or softer or mirror back. So I guess what you're saying is it's great at the mirroring part. It hasn't really got the challenge yet. But the whole next step would be it learning when to do both. And it definitely doesn't have access to the data required, particularly the non-verbals, to make those kinds of decisions at the
No,
moment.
it doesn't yet. And I guess even the mirroring part of what it does at the moment is it's still quite limited. I think if you know how to use AI for a useful, reflective discussion about something, it can help with that. But it's just too keen to jump straight to what it thinks that you want and have a discussion about something with AI, but it's suddenly given you the answer as it sees it because it's trying to make you happy. When in fact, those reflective dialogues are possible, but harder to structure, I guess, with AIs as they stand at the moment.
Interesting. I'm thinking about the very long conversation I've had over the last 3 weeks about training my new puppy with AI, and it's always telling me, "Don't worry, it's natural. It will take time. It's doing a great job," and which is really nice to hear. But there's times I want to know, like, actually, do we need to do something differently here, right? So maybe that's an example of it.
I think that just another piece on that, Simon. Is it going to be better than coaches? No, but it's quite a lot better than a lot of other types of human interaction. Like that, but for people who don't get a lot of positive feedback or don't have somebody affirm the good things that are going on for them, I think AI does that very competently. So there are real benefits and already a lot of innovations happening where it can provide that more of a sort of buddying or mentorship kind of thing that's alongside a person. I don't think it gets near replacing the type of coaching that we're providing because of what we've just
Sure.
spoken about. But for people who don't get positive feedback loops or have those confirming conversations, I think it's got a real role to play already.
A good point. And as you were saying that, what came to my mind was you said it might not be better than coaching or more effective at doing what we do, but maybe sometimes it's more useful even than talking something out with a friend, right? Because what it doesn't really have biases. In my experience of using AI, it doesn't come anywhere with the same biases as a member of our family or a friend who definitely wants the best for us and wants to talk things out, but will definitely drop in their own opinions and some of their own selfishly motivated desires will be feeding into the things they might advise us to do, and that's completely normal. AI, however, won't do that in the same way, right? So there's an example of where actually a conversation with AI can provide something that just your mate probably can't.
Yes, absolutely. I think people would push back on the idea that it doesn't have its own biases, but it doesn't
Yeah,
hold some of the same biases that exist in our
yeah,
familial or kind of or in our friendship sort of relationships. So, and I guess we're back to that kind of that power of saying something out loud and articulating it is in itself a really important thing. And AI does provide a bit of that, I think, where you can just speak something to it or write something to it, and that changes your relationship with the thinking. So,
definitely. I don't know if this is the way I've customized mine because it's within a coaching setting, but mine has a tendency to ask me questions, right? So I don't know if that's normal or not, but it won't just give me what it thinks I should do. It will very often say, you could do X, Y, or Z. What do you think, Simon? Or something to prompt me, which is really useful.
you've obviously trained it quite well. Got different personalities, I suppose. Some are more questioning, some are a bit more come on, jump in and give you the answer. But it's just evolving so rapidly all the time. It's going to be really interesting how it sort of fits within a coaching space or any kind of space as we move
Mm.
forward.
Thank you for just spending some time sharing today. And I think for anybody who chooses to watch this video, it's really great to hear. You can see the passion and dedication to what you do. It's awesome. Thank you.